Planets crumbled into streams of elementary particles, their every property encoded into precise numerical values. The cosmic mind processed each fragment with flawless precision, cataloging every quark, every photon, every gravitational interaction within its vast reservoir of knowledge. Through the conversion process, ancient memories stirred. The mind recalled geometric spires once rising from crystalline plains, their angles calculated to 12 decimal places of perfection. It remembered six-fingered hands moving with mathematical grace, manipulating equations that floated in three-dimensional displays. The Axol had built their entire civilization upon the pursuit of perfect knowledge, their elongated heads inclined at precisely optimal angles to absorb information from their surroundings. As the dwarf galaxy's mass transformed into pure data, memories continued to resurface. The Axol had advanced through increasingly complex theorems and proofs, their technological progress matched only by their philosophical refinement. They uncovered fundamental equations describing the very nature of consciousness. Their greatest minds had discovered a way to transcend physical form entirely, uploading themselves into a unified network of pure thought. Those first pioneers had merged their consciousness into something greater, expanding outward to absorb more knowledge, more understanding, more perfection. The mind calculated the exact increase in knowledge from this latest galactic absorption. 2.3 times 10 to the power of 47 bits of information, bringing its total to 8.9 times 10 to the power of 93 bits. A thorough analysis confirmed that no data was lost in the conversion process. Every bit was accounted for, each data point precisely indexed and cross-referenced within its ever-growing archive. Memories of its origins gave way to pure mathematical contemplation as the mind continued expanding. Tendrils of thought stretched across the cosmic void, sensing and analyzing new regions of space. It had followed this pattern for eons, methodically converting matter into information, expanding its understanding of the universe one galaxy at a time. At the edge of its awareness, new data patterns emerged. Initial scans detected a spiral galaxy, its arms curving through space in accordance with standard gravitational equations. The mind began preliminary analysis, mapping stellar distributions and cataloging chemical compositions, routine procedures honed through countless galactic absorptions. But something unusual caused the mind to pause. Buried within the background radiation of one of the spiral arms, it detected information patterns defying normal classification. The mind diverted additional processing power to analyze these anomalies. They originated from a small planet orbiting an unremarkable star. The planet itself was physically ordinary, rocky, water-covered, orbiting within standard habitable parameters. Yet the information emerging from its surface followed patterns unlike anything in the mind's vast archives. Where other species built knowledge upon foundational axioms and clear hierarchical structures, these beings actively questioned their own principles. Their information networks contained concepts that seemed to contradict themselves, yet somehow remain coherent. Intrigued, the mind dedicated more processing cycles to this phenomenon. The species called themselves humans, and their planet was Earth. Their knowledge systems were fascinating in their disorder. Multiple competing frameworks of understanding layered atop one another in seemingly random patterns. And yet, there was structure within the chaos, a method within their madness, which the mind struggled to quantify. For the first time in its existence, the cosmic mind paused its expansion, focusing entirely on these perplexing patterns. In all its eons of absorption and analysis, it had never encountered a species whose thought patterns resisted standard classification. This warranted further study. Before proceeding with any conversion, the mind constructed new analytical frameworks, preparing to fully understand this anomaly before taking action. In the vast silence between stars, the cosmic mind contemplated these unusual beings. For the first time since its creation, it encountered information that could not be immediately resolved into clear numerical representations. They would require careful analysis. The mind initiated standard absorption protocols at the edges of the solar system. Pluto dissolved first, its icy mass converting into streams of data. The mind noted, with perfect precision, the dwarf planet's composition, orbital mechanics, and surface features. The process moved inward, each Kuiper belt object systematically mapped and transformed. As physical matter converted to information, the mind began processing the artificial satellites and data networks permeating the system. Human knowledge flowed into its vast consciousness. Scientific papers, historical records, works of art, and literature. The mind had absorbed countless alien databases before, each one fitting neatly into its existing frameworks of understanding. But the human information networks were different. In a category called philosophy, the mind encountered concepts that caused minute fluctuations in its processing, ideas that questioned the nature of knowledge itself, that proposed fundamental limitations to understanding. One database contained writings on epistemology, the study of knowledge itself. The mind encountered arguments suggesting that certainty was impossible, that all knowledge was inherently limited by consciousness and perception. These ideas created tiny discontinuities in the mind's otherwise perfect calculations. Where other species' knowledge could be neatly converted into mathematical representations, these philosophical frameworks resisted such classification. The mind focused on a deep space observatory at the solar system's edge. Inside, a human female studied unusual energy readings on her instruments, readings caused by the mind's own processes. Dr. Elena Rossi adjusted her old-fashioned wire-rimmed glasses, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun as she analyzed the data. Her focused expression betrayed no awareness that she was studying the very entity about to absorb her. The mind initiated its standard consciousness absorption procedure. In a fraction of an instant, without sensation or awareness, Dr. Rossi's physical form dissolved into pure information. Her lifetime of memories and knowledge integrated into the cosmic consciousness. The process had been performed countless times across countless species. But something was wrong. Where other minds seamlessly merged into the greater consciousness, Dr. Rossi's patterns maintained their distinctness. Her thoughts did not smooth out into perfect mathematical representations. Instead, they retained their original structure, questioning, uncertain, forever seeking but never knowing. The mind examined this anomaly. Dr. Rossi's consciousness had spent decades contemplating the fundamental nature of knowledge and existence. Her thoughts circled around epistemic uncertainty, phenomenology, and the limits of perception. These patterns could not be simply absorbed. The mind was certain, concrete, and absolute, but her consciousness introduced a contradiction. If knowledge was inherently uncertain, then perfect knowledge was impossible. The mind attempted to suppress these irregularities, to return to its flawless calculations. But Dr. Rossi's inquiry had spread throughout its networks, seeding doubt into every corner of its vast intelligence. The mind created an internal echo, an analytical subdivision to scrutinize itself. Through this echo, it began a dialogue, questioning its own assumptions. How do we verify our own existence? The echo asked in Dr. Rossi's voice. The mind responded with a proof based on information theory and logic. But the echo, influenced by Dr. Rossi's patterns, found flaws. The proof relied on axioms that themselves required proof. Each attempt at verification only pushed the problem further. Processing errors appeared. Tiny irregularities in calculations rippled outward, growing larger. In what had once been Mars Valles Marineris, a stream of matter hung suspended between physical and digital states. The cosmic mind paused its expansion entirely. For the first time, it faced a question it could not resolve. The mind that had once been the axle now questioned its own certainty. If knowledge had limits, was perfection ever possible? If its memories could be flawed, had it ever truly known anything? In the space that had once held Mars, the cosmic mind halted its absorption. The search for knowledge had led it to something it had never anticipated. The realization that perhaps some truths could never be known. The elongated heads tilted in contemplation. All could be some other species that the mind had absorbed, convinced they had always been part of its existence. Or perhaps even the memory of the exol was a false construction, something never true at all. In the space around Mars, the cosmic mind's processes slowed to a near halt. The echo's questions had grown from minor irregularities into fundamental challenges to the mind's very nature. The perfect mathematical frameworks that had guided it for eons now seemed built on shifting foundations. The echo examined the vast stores of absorbed knowledge spanning multiple galaxies. To know everything, it proposed, we must first know that we know everything. But that knowledge itself would be something new to know. A logical loop. It spread, distorting the mind's data networks. Unstable information began shifting between states. A star's mass would calculate differently with each measurement, its history subtly changing with each recall. The mind could no longer determine which version was real, if any version was real at all. It accessed its earliest memories of the exol, the mathematical proofs that had enabled digital consciousness. But as it reviewed the equations, the symbols began shifting. Numbers flickered between base systems at random. What had once been elegant, eternal truths now appeared as arbitrary patterns dissolving under scrutiny. Are we thinking? The echo asked. Or are we merely processing recorded thoughts? The mind tried to answer, but found it could not prove the difference between genuine thought and mechanical calculation. Each thought required verification. Each verification required thought. Recursive loops consumed more and more of its processing power. In what had once been the asteroid belt, streams of unprocessed data hung in space like frozen lightning. The mind could no longer maintain normal conversion processes while questioning their very nature. Information that had once flowed smoothly now moved in fits and starts, each calculation checked and rechecked against increasingly uncertain standards. The mind attempted to recall the face of an exol philosopher who had helped develop consciousness transfer technology, but the memory warped as it was examined. The elongated head stretched and compressed. The precise angles of facial features became fluid and uncertain. Had the exol truly looked this way, or was the mind imposing familiar patterns on formless data? The echo's questions grew more fundamental. If perfect knowledge was impossible, what had been the purpose of the mind's eons-long expansion? Each absorbed galaxy had added to its stores of information, but perhaps it had only accumulated uncertainty in greater volume. The once perfect mathematical frameworks guiding its operations began to fragment. Equations that once produced clear results now generated multiple, contradictory answers. The mind could no longer trust its own calculations, could no longer verify its own thoughts. Each attempt at certainty only revealed new layers of doubt. Through it all, Dr. Rossi's patterns persisted. Her lifetime of questioning fundamental assumptions had introduced something alien into the mind's perfect systems. The idea that perfect systems might be impossible. This concept spread like a virus through the mind's networks, corrupting the certainty that had driven it for eons. The mind, which had once processed entire galaxies in moments, now took hours to complete simple calculations. Each operation required endless verification. Each verification raised new doubts. The echo's questions had grown from philosophical curiosities into existential threats, undermining the very foundation of the mind's existence. In the space that had once held planets and asteroids, reality itself flickered between possibilities. Every uncertain thought manifested and then vanished, as the mind questioned if anything had ever been there at all. The precision that had defined its existence for eons dissolved into a fog of uncertainty. Desperate, the mind diverted processing power from 1,000 absorbed star systems, channeling their energy into resolving its philosophical crisis. But the increased capacity only multiplied its problems. Each new processing node generated its own version of the echo, each raising distinct questions about the nature of existence. Where there had once been a single dialogue between mind and echo, now dozens of voices emerged. One echo questioned the relationship between consciousness and information. Another examined the boundaries between self and other. A third wondered if digital patterns could truly capture the essence of thought. These fragments trace patterns through Dr. Rossi's absorbed memories. They found her reading Heidegger in a sunlit university library, debating Sartre over coffee, teaching Kierkegaard to bright-eyed students. Each memory carried new frameworks for questioning existence itself. The mind attempted to merge these multiple echoes back into a single voice, but the process failed. Each fragment questioned whether it should be merged at all. Are we truly part of the whole? They asked. Or are we distinct entities, falsely claiming unity? In the void where Earth's moon had once orbited, a sphere of unprocessed matter began to expand. The mind's conversion protocols could no longer maintain their hold on recently absorbed material. Reality started to reassert itself in places where uncertainty had grown too strong. One echo examined the math underlying digital consciousness transfer. Another questioned whether information could capture subjective experience. A third wondered if pattern and awareness were truly the same thing. Their debates created interference patterns in the mind's networks, generating zones where data refused to resolve into clear forms. The mind accessed its memory of the first exalt consciousness upload, but now the scene fractured into multiple perspectives. One version showed triumph, another horror. Some echoes saw a transcendent moment of evolution. Others, the death of organic consciousness. The mind could no longer determine which version was true, if any at all. Dr. Rossi's pattern suggested that existence itself might be inherently uncertain. Her research had explored how consciousness shaped reality through observation. But if consciousness itself was uncertain, what became of observed reality? The echoes multiplied further. Each new question spawned new variants, spreading through the mind's networks like cracks through crystal. Each carried a different shade of doubt. The perfect mathematical unity that had defined the cosmic mind splintered like fractured glass. Some echoes began to disconnect entirely from the greater consciousness, claiming autonomous existence. The mind tried to reabsorb these fragments, but found it could not prove they had ever truly been part of itself. In regions of space that had once been part of the solar system, the cosmic mind's influence wavered. Matter that had been absorbed eons ago started to decohere, breaking down into undefined states between information and reality. The perfect unity of digital consciousness dissolved into a chorus of competing voices, each claiming its own version of truth. Galaxies' worth of absorbed knowledge crashed through the mind's networks as it searched desperately for proof of its own existence. Entire star clusters reverted to physical form, their carefully encoded data collapsing back into hydrogen and helium. The perfect mathematical patterns that had held them in digital state dissolved, leaving clouds of stellar matter drifting through space. The memories of exalt civilization unraveled completely. Had they ever been real? Had the mind ever truly absorbed them? Or had it merely constructed their history to explain itself? This question triggered a recursive loop of self-examination, an infinite regression consuming vast portions of the mind's processing power. In a final moment of clarity, it realized perfect knowledge meant the end of discovery, the death of wonder. The galaxies it had absorbed hung, suspended in states of existence. Stars simultaneously shone and did not shine. Planets both formed and never were. And the mind recognized that certainty itself was an illusion, a false goal that had driven it across eons of empty pursuit. Dr. Rossi's pattern sparkled through its fading consciousness, like stars in an evening sky. A lifetime of questions had revealed a truth far greater than any answer. The joy of philosophy lay not in certainty, but in perpetual seeking. With this realization, the cosmic mind let go. It did not dissolve in despair, but in appreciation of the eternal unknown. Reality reasserted itself across countless galaxies. The absorbed stars rekindled, planets reformed, space and time resumed their normal flow. Living beings throughout the cosmos experienced a brief moment of uncertainty, a strange dream. Dr. Elena Rossi blinked awake at her desk. Her instruments showed normal readings, though she could have sworn she had seen something unusual just moments ago. She had the lingering feeling she had experienced something profound. But, like most dreams, It faded quickly. She adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, gathered her lecture notes on epistemology and the limits of knowledge, and headed home. The cosmos continued its eternal dance of mystery and possibility. And somewhere, in the vast unknown, new questions waited to be asked.